All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the Geopolitics in Conflict show. Very, very excited to be with you as always. Elizabeth and I, we have a special guest for you. Like I mentioned to you last time, we're gonna have a guest because, as you know, guys, we are moving into the direction of you understanding the financial aspects of it. Because you need to understand what lies ahead, you need to understand how investments work, and you need to thrive despite what's going on the global market. And today we have a guest, someone we know, someone we deal with, someone we understand, none other than Lior Ganz. He's a financial guy, he's the guru. He understands the ins and outs of finance. Okay? This is why we decided we extend the invitation and we are so grateful to have him here. So, hi Lior.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, very, very excited. If you will be kind and just introduce yourself for our viewers who do not know you yet, they're gonna get to know you more. If you will be
Sure,
kind, just a brief introduction.
absolutely. When I was 13, my father's business went under, and I had to start working for myself. So, saving money actually became something that I did as a teenager, which differentiated me in the classroom from everybody else, and that kind of created a situation where I I was on a different trajectory
Mhm.
than most of my friends. And at 16, I had some money saved up from babysitting and handing out flyers on windshields and doing everything else that you can imagine, even keeping scoreboards at basketball games. Those guys that play
Mhm.
on the big scoreboard. And
Mhm.
uh, my banker, the guy I used to meet at the branch when I deposited, he said, "Hey, if your parents sign a waiver, you can start buying." Back then, it was mutual funds as a teenage, as a minor. So I got my parents to waltz into the branch and sign it, and I started investing when I was 16 and a half. This was after the dot-com bubble started to burst.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
in hindsight, an opportune time. And from that point on, I became an investor. My father tried his luck in business again and failed again when I was just out of the IDF. So essentially, when I started to become an adult in society, there was no parachutes whatsoever, right? And so I went into business,
Mhm.
sort of blessed with the idea that, man, my dad, I saw him like crash twice, um, big times. Actually, it's three times. But my point is, I became a businessman very early in my life and a full time investor. And then I started to recap my notes and my ideas and everything else. And then I started telling friends about it, publishing it, and they said, you should just circulate this to a wide audience. There's value in here, and that's how wealthresearchgroup.com got started as a free financial newsletter in 2016. So we're on our ninth year now.
Wow.
And guys, there'll be a link to sign up to the newsletter in the description below.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. Speaking of the newsletter, Lior, very, very interesting. I
Mhm.
read them.
Yep, we
We
get
all
them.
read them here because we like to learn more about the financial aspects. So that said, I like us to just get into understanding, for example, the link between geopolitics and finance. And our question to you is, where do you see the global financial system moving forward, given the
Right.
turbulence of the
Mhm.
geopolitical landscape?
Yeah. Um, our global financial system is American led post World War II. So
Hmm.
basically, after World War II, and after dropping two nukes on Japan, and after Europe was totally decimated, you
Hmm.
had this country where the border to the west and to the east are oceans
Hmm.
that no one can disrupt, and the borders to the north and to the south are two friendly countries that no one can disrupt, and essentially you had no threats on the United States once the Japanese Navy was dismantled. But then a new threat emerged: the alliance between the Soviet Union and the United States, which worked to defeat their common enemies during the war, led to the next big threat on the United States. And so the United States created a system to work with its allies to protect both themselves and their alliances against the threat of the Soviet Union. And so everything you see today, NATO, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations, they were all founded originally. They're not today acting like it, but originally they were founded in order to create the US-led global financial order and global military order. Because as part of this, the cornerstone of this whole thing was the Bretton Woods Agreement that basically created a reserve currency for the entire for most of the free world, backed by gold originally. And in exchange for working with this new financial system, these allies that the United States started to create around the world, the United States Navy would keep the oceans totally safe and secure because they were the only Navy worth anything in 1945.
Yeah.
And so you had the beginning of this global trade and globalization in general. It through the next 2-3 decades, it changed a lot because of the changing dynamics of threats, and these countries that were decimated started to come back, be it Japan, be it the Europeans, and otherwise. And so this system has evolved a lot through the years, but it also became obsolete after the Soviet Union fell. And so the entire reasoning behind it fell, but because there was no vision for the day after, because normally empires the size of the Soviet Union, it takes them 2 centuries to fall, not 2 years. There was no vision for the day after. And so America was left a country with no real purpose of where it's going next, politically or financially. And what they did was just double down on what worked, which was globalization. So they started a path of hyperglobalization. Hyperglobalization is what we've been in since 1992, and that is a global financial system which tries to use the leverages and the advantages of the United States by exporting all of them and outsourcing all of them to third world and second world countries, and inviting what would be adversaries and enemies into this global multicultural world where wars are outdated, religions are outdated, everything's outdated. We can all live together because there's no real difference between everyone. We can all forgive each other and put history in the past, and that's called progressiveness. This is hyperglobalization. In the last few years, we have seen it go to the extreme, and some people call it woke, but it's the end of the postmodernist progressive era for the global financial system. And I think that once COVID hit, the world started to realize that the system is not working anymore, and we're dismantling it. So what we're doing right now is deglobalizing, and we just don't know how this new world works. It's not all coming apart at the same time, but everything that you've been living in for the last 85-90 years is coming undone
to an end.
Well, and so something that I find very interesting is what you just said about the deglobalization process, because you're right. This isn't the first empire that has been colonial based, right? So we have had, the French before us and the British before us and the Dutch before that. And so now, and all of those empires have collapsed. All of them have fallen. I remember, so I went to a French school. I speak French fluently, but I went to a French school growing up because that was the universal language then, right? It was at the very, very, very tail end of that being the universal language, but there's a reason that was the universal language. Now it's English. So can you speak a little bit to how you are watching the deglobalization process happen or decolonization, I guess, that process happen? And what are the telltale signs that you're seeing that it is happening?
So the United States of America is not a colonial power at all. It's the opposite. Um, the Europeans did colonialize. They mercantiled and they colonialized.
Mhm.
The United States, when it invited the French and the British and their other allies in Europe to Bretton Woods, the British and French went there thinking that what will come of Bretton Woods is basically American presence in Europe forever. That's colonization.
Mm-hmm.
And American-led politics decided that America will not be a colonial power ever at all. There is presence of the American military in most countries around the world, but not as a colonial power whatsoever. As an influencer, as an overreach, as many things, as many criticized things, but not as a colonial power.
Mm-hmm.
It is not there to extract the wealth and to prey upon the sovereignty. In fact, the British and the French, they called back home and they were like, these Americans, they've gone mad. They don't want anything from us. In fact, they want to protect us. They want to give us loans. They have an entire plan. It's called the Marshall Plan. They're gonna elevate us. So they could not have been more cheerful. But the Bretton Woods system did create American military presence in many countries, and the abuse of that system, the abuse of that gesture from the United States, where many of these countries did not do anything to protect themselves. They relied upon the American taxpayer to do it for them. Now, are there rogue forces in there? There absolutely are. The CIA has been a failed agency since inception. Originally, it failed so much it was like it failed everywhere. And it was out of reach for the United States government. It almost acted like its own, like it's policing itself and governing itself. And many times the American president did not know what the CIA was up to.
That's true.
And the CIA directors came to the Oval Office with wild ideas. So a lot of criticism came from there, and still till today. And there's a lot of criticism in the last 20 years because of the way that the military has been used to change the world, which is not what it's. A military is there to defeat an enemy, not to change a culture. So my point being, so that's one thing. That's colonialization and the United States are not one and the same at all. But what led to the Bretton Woods agreement being even functional and so efficient originally in elevating our world in terms of financially, we have never had a better world. And so this eradication of poverty in so many countries around the world is owed to globalization in its first stage, not in this stage that we're seeing now in the hyper globalization stage. But to your point, what's happening right now? The American military and the American Navy is not big enough to patrol the oceans. You see a group out of Yemen called the Houthis that are able to choke the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. And this is just one point. There will be so many others like it. The American military and the American Navy are not big anymore compared to other forces on the open waters. So you can forget about open water security. We're going back to piracy. We're going back to clashes on the open seas. And we're going back to countries securing their own supply chains without a T-shirt going from a port in China all the way to Rotterdam, where Calvin Klein will slap his little tag on it, and then you will sell it to a Walmart. This will not happen. You will not be able to sustain that system. No one will be able to secure that system. And so we're moving to localized supply chains and to regional connective economies. And some countries are going to be very critical because they will be able to work with the East and with the West. You will have connector economies. Countries like Poland that can work both with the United States and with the Chinese and the Russians, or Mexico, for example, and other countries that will be able to be important liaisons between the two. But we are moving into a world where the United States is going to form alliances with other countries, but they will not do the work for them. Japan will secure itself in that region against the Chinese threat. Japan is militarizing more than any other country in the world right now. They're moving from pacifistic to 392 billion on a 5-year military plan. The Germans, which they wanted to do away with their military, are thinking about a mandatory drafting to their military, and they're going to be a very strong military power back in Europe. France is going to be the largest military in Europe soon, and I can already tell you, the French and the Russians are already at war. There's already a war in the Sahel between the French and the Russians, and I think that the French and the Russians will clash in the Ukraine as well, and so we are deglobalizing. The last deglobalization era, just so everybody's on the same page, is 1910 till 1945. In 1910 till 1945, you had the formation of a central bank in the United States. You had First World War. You had the Great Depression. You had the Second World War. And so deglobalization is pretty violent compared to globalization.
Interesting. This leads me to ask you the question about, and I'm going to pivot to the financial aspects of it, because I would like our viewers to really get the knowledge from you as far as investments. And we'll tie it to the changes on the global landscape. Of course, we know the world is moving into a multipolar system. But what I want to focus on is the idea of now more countries are de-dollarizing, right?
Absolutely.
With that sort of the speed, where should people start to think about investments, given that maybe the dollar might not be, let's say, 5 years from today?
Okay. So a reserve currency, status that gets morphed into just a national currency is not the death of the dollar. The dollar is not going to die because countries are going to de-dollarize. They are already de-dollarizing. But if we look at fiat currencies in general, the dollar is certainly the most beautiful of all the ugly ducks, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. There is no other alternative in the fiat currency world to the US dollar. The euro is much more risk of coming undone than the dollar. We don't know what the yuan, the Chinese yuan, we don't even know what it's worth because it's coupled to the United States dollar. It's basically pegged. The United States dollar. If the CCP would ever release it and make it free floating, you'll know what it's worth. But no one trusts the yuan. No country is going to start hoarding the yuan. So that's
but Lior, hold on a second, Lior. I'm going to challenge you, brother, on this.
Challenge me.
But the Chinese, and I've been digging into this. I'm in a process for writing a book about China. The Chinese have no interest in turning their currency as a global one, the same way as the dollar is. They have no interest in that. Okay. What they are interested in is ensuring that any bilateral trade or a global trade, for that matter, for whomever country wants to do that, the Chinese will prefer that they will trade in the yuan.
Yeah, that's where we're going. And all I'm saying is, when that process accelerates, it doesn't mean the end of the dollar.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying. Will the dollar be devalued through this process? Yes, because as a reserve currency, many countries hold it more than they probably should. They can strengthen their own currencies and rely less and less on the US dollar. But the trends of the 21st century still favor the United States as the world's largest and most important financial superpower. By the end of this century, by 2100, the United States will have between 6 and 700 million people, and China will have between 6 and 700 million people. So you have to keep in mind the United States is the golden goose that keep laying eggs. Now, it's if I was to write a book about the history of the United States, you would not believe that country still exists through everything that it went through. Every decade, there's something existential, and yet you guys are still here, and it's because you have your assets are just the best. But the problem is you have sometimes lunatics in charge of those assets.
Yes.
But
So
That's true.
that's actually the question that I'm going to bring up, and the point that I want to bring up, because I think one of the interesting things that's happening being here in the United States is that everything seems to be an attack on the public, right? Our food is broken, our medical system is, people are filing bankruptcy due to the debt from it. It's wildly expensive. It seems almost like every corporation is out to just get more and more and more away from the American people. And, we know that there's, the kind of agenda out there where you'll own nothing and be happy, right? And so that seems to be what's happening is, we have renter economies, and the United States living here as the middle class is shrinking. So as things are sort of getting worse and worse and worse for the United States, which is it's a very big departure from after World War II, when everything was growing, when everything was getting better, where you could work at a gas station and own a house. Now you can have a full-time job and not be able to own a home. And so I'm interested in, because I definitely see, the dollar is obviously still strong. And if you look at the amount, percentage in held currencies, the US dollar is still, I think, at about 50%. The euros, I think, is like 20 something percent. And the yuan is at like 8%, right? So it's still very, very low. But as the population of the United States, because we have two big problems. One, we have massive divisiveness. And, Ray Dalio talks about that being one of the cornerstones of the fall of an empire. And, we have a whole bunch of the other markers also, but that's one of them. We have massive debt. And granted, a lot of the other countries that would sort of be in the running for, next top of the list countries are the ones who hold those debts, right? So it's not in their best interest to crater the United States immediately. But as we watch China just drop, was it 53 billion in US bonds? Yeah. So I'm interested in, as we have all these changes in the United States that are not for the better, living here, I can tell you they're not for the better. How do you see that affecting what we have going forward?
Yeah. So I don't think I even answered your original question about the dollar. But so the answer, my answer, will always be this: reserve currency or not. Mm-hmm. I don't have I live in Israel. Our shekel is not the reserve currency of the world, and I'm doing fine. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to have the reserve currency to be prosperous.
That's a great point.
Okay, so this is not the end all be all. Mm. And just keep in mind, a fiat currency only is a denomination of your wealth, but your wealth is decided by your active income, so your career, plus your investments, and your investments are not savings. Savings are not an investment.
No.
So my answer will always be that if for a productive person, his wealth is tied to his ability to grow his active income, be it inside of the business that he is involved with or the business that he owns. And secondly, how he invests in the growth of the world. The world is an ever-growing pie of wealth. Ever growing.
That's true.
The problem is only that your cut could be shrinking while the pie is growing. That's really the problem. This is really what it all comes down to. The pie is always growing. The pie is always growing. There are people on this planet right now, as we're doing this interview, that are worth billions of dollars. They are not living your life. They're living on a different planet.
Yeah.
And there are people that will not survive by the time your audience hears this because they're at malnutrition. We're already living. There's the 8 billion, 9 billion souls that are on this planet are living drastically different lives. The reserve currency is not this very important thing. It's important, but you'll live without it. The United States will live without it. It lived for a very long time before it, right? When you started in 1776, you had no reserve currency, and you defeated the British. You'll be fine. So
that's actually a really stellar point. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
Yeah, that's a stellar point.
Yeah, and so that's first. Secondly, your question now, Elizabeth, was about you'll own nothing. You'll
be happy.
The Klaus Schwab thing, and
really quick, I want to speak to actually the point that you just made, because we have the reserve currency and a lot of people are still not doing well. So that's a stellar point, because that does not appear to be tied to each other. So thank you for saying that, because I think that's something that hasn't actually been said very much.
I mean, you can count on thousands of fingers the amount of people that went from rags to riches in the United States. In the United States is the only country in the world where people go from rags to riches twice in their lifetimes. Everywhere. You don't have that mobility anywhere. The amount of wealth that the average person can connect himself to by being in the United States is uncanny to any other country. There is no other country where the opportunities that come through your normal lifetime are so vast. But like I said, it's an ever-growing pie, and you may be just left out of it. And so to your point, your country is having a deep identity crisis because you don't know what you are anymore. You have half of the country that is trying to go back to the traditional values of the United States. Those are I'll say there are three countries, basically, or four. That's my final answer. So you have the extreme left. Those are the West Coast cities that are living in their religion, which is postmodernism, progressiveness. It's a different universe. You go there, you speak to the people, they speak one religion. Their religion is my truth is the only truth, and everything else doesn't matter. That religion only exists because they live in California, where no matter what happens in the morning, they can say that they are a rhino, that they are a laptop. I am a laptop today. Nothing happens. There is no consequence to anything that you do. There is no threat on you. But if you take that religion and put it anywhere else where people struggle, that religion is canceled immediately because they realize that they're nut jobs. So that's one America. It's very strong because it has its stranglehold on media and everywhere else. And there obviously many of them are useful idiots on serving China and Russia and Iran for their purposes of indoctrinating people into this progressiveness. So that's one America. And there are millions of people like that. They will still be progressive until the day they die. And it's important to understand that. Then you have the moderate left. They're more about like human rights and whatnot. They're Democrats, but they can speak with the other side. They can speak with Republicans. There are things that they see eye to eye. Okay? Just like in the 50s and 60s and 70s, you can see debates, very thoughtful debates between the left and the right. And then you have extreme right, which is no good either. And then you have what Trump represents, which is conservatism. You really didn't have a lot of presidents that are conservative during your entire lifetime, and certainly not in the life of the country. But conservatism means that Donald Trump is much more like the founding fathers than any other president, because he's a businessman. Just like the founding fathers were not politicians. They had their own lives. They came to Washington, served, came back to their real lives. And that's that model is really the model that the founding fathers thought was the best. Nobody thought that there would be such a career as a politician. Anthony Blinken is a career politician. He went to Harvard, to Columbia, then he was a journalist. So he never stepped out to the real world. He cannot negotiate in a flea market to buy a piece of soda. When he comes anywhere around the world, he has no clue about anything. He's just a pure academic that has a fantasy about how the world should be, and he's not respected. On the flip side, a person like Jared Kushner that came to the Middle East, for the first year, he sat in a room and heard all the sides. For a full year, he did not speak. He just took notes. And Mohammed bin Salman told him, you will make peace in the Middle East. I guarantee you, you're the person. And it's because he told him everything the Americans used to send us are either people that have no real power to do anything. They're just there to have lunch. Other people that fell asleep. And the third kind of person who is the Clinton, Obama type, which comes in and say, hey, here's what I learned in Harvard, and we're going to tell you exactly what you need to do here. We're going to shove everything we want up your throats. So what Trump brings is, because he's not a politician from Washington, mobilizing troops is not his first nature. He doesn't view people as things that are like move troops here, move troops there. He doesn't Star Wars. He looks at America for the assets that it has. America has the world's greatest assets, and those assets are what helps him pick up the phone and make deals, alliances, things that actually benefit everyone. And that is what the world needs, and that is how the United States should behave. Now, when you think about the future for the United States, that should be what the United States aims to do, because no one can help the world better than the United States of America. In terms of your assets and what you can deliver, they are just the best. And it's not through military means that this will happen. It will happen through creating frameworks that work for you and for your allies. And that's how you deter other countries, not with threats, but with great ideas that actually work. And I think that is really the existential war that the West is fighting. Because what the West has done is it rose to the top, and then the people that helped it rise to the top, what they did was they failed to show their children why they're there. You got decadent, and because of that decadence, you allowed your youth not to realize that waking up in the morning, igniting a truck, going to your Starbucks, going to the beach, that it looks like that everybody's lived like that, right? No. It's only here because we did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I see no better example of this than Senator Ted Cruz asking Lloyd Austin, your
secretary,
yes, asking, should you have nuked Japan? It's a layup. It's like a slam dunk question. It's like should we have killed 250 to 300,000 more soldiers, our people, Americans, and made this war last another decade, and the Soviets would have got a handle on Japan, and then you would have literally a new existential threat on you because the Soviets would have had open sea access? Or should we have nuked them? It's a slam dunk question, and he could not answer that question. And that tells you that even the person that should know this better than anybody cannot say that because he's progressive, because he's not an American. He's not an American. His loyalty is not to the United States of America and not to YouTube. It's to progressiveness, which is above nationalism. So the world is going back to nationalism. The world is pulling away from globalization. Every country is going to look within. It's going to look what its assets are, what it can negotiate, and that's what's going to happen. Forget about commodities just going from Peru to the United States just because the United States can pay the bill. The Peru is going to ask something for that lithium. It's going to ask you, hey, can we have 20 people from Amazon coming here and teaching us about e-trade, about e-commerce? What can you offer us? We want to enjoy this. You're going to enjoy our commodities. We want to enjoy something as well. Every country is going to look and see what its assets are on the global market, and that's how the world is going to operate. We are going to pull away from each other, but if you have responsible people leading governments, then you won't have wars. You will have deglobalization in a positive sense. But if you won't have it, then you will have a lot of wars, a lot, because every country is going to fear. And I can give you no better example than this. Think about Saudi Arabia right now, looking at Biden and Blinken bending over and pleading with the Iranians, begging them not to escalate war. Think about how this looks to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, what it thinks to itself is in 7 months, if these Americans pick Biden again, we are buying a nuke from Pakistan. And then after Saudi Arabia gets it, then the Turks are going to say, well, heck, we're going to buy one as well. And then the Egyptians are going to say the same thing. And then you have a Middle East that's everybody is a nuclear power. And then the Iranians are going to say, well, you know what? This is a problem. We're gonna deploy interballistic missiles aimed at Detroit, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, and New York. And that's the world you're gonna live in. So we're literally right now in the next 2-3 years, we're fighting for everything. We're fighting for Western civilization to wake up, understand the threats that are existential right now. And if we don't have the right leaders, then we're in a very troubled place. Yeah.
We're good. Let me ask my last question here.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure what Lior, what you said, it's accurate. As a matter of fact, I disclosed some of this in my previous writings and all. It's spot on. It's the idea.
And it's certainly enough to make people wake up, I sure hope.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
that's what we're doing
here is the other side to this, in my opinion. And this is also where that idea of, despite the conditions that were there, you still can thrive if you know how.
Absolutely.
And this is why I want to ask you, Lior, for our viewers, because, they trust us. Usually when we suggest something to them, they know we're not going to just tell them whatever. That's why even when we do the dedicated videos and all that, they really come on and watch it and listen and ask questions in the comments and so forth. So despite what you said regarding the changes and what the world needs to pay attention to, the opportunity, where do you see the financial opportunities for average Joe, average Jane, if he or she wants to invest? Is it gold? Is it money markets? What is it?
It's opportunities are everywhere. Everywhere you see a problem is where you see the opportunity. The problem is the opportunity. As an investor, I think that you need to realize that despite of the bubble that most Americans living, that America is on a decline, it's plateauing, our best days are behind it. It's all a crackpot. At the turn of the century, at the turn of the 20th century, in 1904, in the 3-4 years just before the Wright brothers invent the airplanes, Thomas Edison, after like 10,000 failed attempts, grasps the idea of a light bulb before the world is powered up and everybody can fly everywhere. The head of the patent office said he will be closing the patent office because everything that's already been invented is everything that the humankind can invent. This is a true story.
Yeah, I think I heard that and I was like, that is the most arrogant thing I've ever heard.
In 1890, the scholars at Oxford University, which was like, these are like the mavericks, they were asked to write a letter about how London would look like in 1990. 100 years later, they'll seal the envelope and they'll open it up in 1990. And in 1890, 4 years before Carl Carl Benz and Henry Ford and everybody else started to think about how do you turn a horse and buggy into a motorized vehicle, they wrote that in 1990 there will be no one living in London because it will be full of horse manure and the disease will be everywhere. 3 years later, the world changed. So my point is the opportunity is everywhere. But you have to realize the average person should not concern himself with investments as much as he needs to concern himself with his career path. His career path is going to determine 90% of his wealth, and his investments are going to depend on are going to decide the 10 remaining percent. Where you will make the most money in your life will be in your chosen profession. So that's where you really need to start triple downing on. In terms of investments, you should keep going long the United States of America. Okay, I will just give you a personal example. Totally biased. I'm a shareholder of this company. I believe in this company. If I could only own one company, this will be the company, etc., etc. So I am biased. Tesla is a $500 billion company today, and it will be a $10 trillion company and a $20 trillion company before I die. And my point is to tell you that in the United States, there are the best business visionaries ever, and they have just gotten started. So you don't have to worry about your investments. Put your money where it works, okay? Put your money where it works. And the United States works. The United States works today. It will work tomorrow. It will work in 20 years. You have so much potential, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in everything else. Warren Buffett bought his first stock a few days before Pearl Harbor. There is no connection between timing and between wealth. Just go long America. Go long America. That is my big message to you. And then if you want to think about your career, where is this money going? Your government is deficit spending trillions of dollars into the economy. Where is that money going? If it's not going to you, it's going to Bezos or that guy or this guy. It's going somewhere. It's going from the government to you. So grab a little bit of it. Find the opportunity. Where are people moving into? Which cities are becoming the cities of the future for NASA? Which states are going to be important? 75% of your millionaires in your country come from real estate, including your previous president. Go to where the money is. And the money is still in America. Dollar currency, whatever, all that fluff is irrelevant. Tesla is going to be a $10 trillion company, and if the dollar is not as valued then it will be worth 15 trillion, inflation adjusted. The name of the game is not to be in money market accounts, not to be in savings. Put your money in productive assets. All you need to do is listen to earnings calls from just start here, okay? Here's a nice one for you. Take the Nasdaq 100. These are 100 companies. Listen to all the earnings calls from the last quarter of all these 100 companies. You will learn more than any college degree will ever give you, and you will find the 5 companies that you will say, man, with that kind of leadership, this company is going to the moon. And that's it.
Wow.
That's all you need.
Wow.
That's all you need.
I love this advice. This is fantastic.
Very insightful.
Yeah.
Very insightful. And wow, thank you so much, Lior. We truly appreciate you sharing your knowledge here.
Hey, my portfolio is available for your listeners if you want. Just download my portfolio, wealthresearchgroup.com /portfolio. That's right. It. Go there.
We will have it on the description for you guys. If our advice to you, and you know me by now, I don't just sugarcoat things. If something I don't believe in,
truth, David.
My advice to you: go take a look, do your homework. Go take a look, read up what this newsletter is all about, read up what Lior Ganz is all about, and reach your own conclusion. Do not listen to me. reach
me.
your own conclusion because you're smart enough to know. You've been with us for now almost 3 years. And this is why we always say, when we bring a guest, we bring in someone that you can learn from. Lior is someone I listen to, and I heed his advice regarding the financial. Do you guys know that the dedicated videos we did, it was because of the recommendation of Lior, and we end up investing in those companies. This is what I want to tell you. This is, you go take a look at this newsletter. We're going to post it for you guys, and we will have Lior again, and you guys learn
absolutely,
from
yeah.
this. It's an opportunity. You're not going to hear this in a mainstream media. We tell it, this is what we decided to gear the channel towards. So
Well, and I want to say, Lior, I really appreciate what you just said because, you know, it, especially if you're looking at mainstream media, if you're looking at sort of the news of what's going on in the world, what you think is that everything is crumbling around you, and there is sort of that pervasive thought and feeling, especially here in the United States,
yeah.
that everything is going to collapse and it's the end of everything.
Yeah.
But most of the people that are here on this planet right now were born after World War II. And so all Americans have ever known is this incline, right? This incline of life getting better and better and better. And then all of a sudden in the last, 20-ish, longer than that, but 20-ish years, we've really started to see a decline. And so when you look at how hopeful Americans are, I mean, the hope is like in the toilet, but people around the world have been living without the reserve currency for their entire lives. And you are right. And I really appreciate the perspective and the appropriate hopefulness that you bring to the table. So I just wanted to tell you I appreciate that, because none of the guests we've ever had have actually brought that perspective to the table. And we've had a lot of guests.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you for that.
Well, we are very grateful, Lior. On behalf of the entire community, we say thank you for carving out time for us. We know how busy you are, especially being an investor. It's no easy task, but we are very grateful, and we look forward to seeing you next time. As always, prepare yourself for a changing world order. Till next time, guys.